Hello and welcome to episode 684 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, and yes, I know you think fantasy is over. I assure you, it is not. Ton of DFS action for the playoffs, props action, playoff contests, and yes, the reason we are gathered here today, playoff only best ball. To discuss this today, I am joined by a young man who has seemingly, pathetically, dedicated his life to best ball over the last 4 years or so, has had some incredible results, include winning Best Ball Mania 1 on Underdog, second in the 555 on DraftKings this year. It is, of course, everyone's favorite best ball grinder, Justin Herzig of both ETR and Own the Moment. Justin, how's it going, buddy?
Doing well. Yeah, I mean, when you can just find a niche within a niche within a niche of an industry, you've got to specialize. And apparently that's what happened with best ball.
It's a beautiful thing. You guys know I love the super niche content. Anyways, on today's show, we're going to focus on, as I said, those playoff-only best ball tournaments on Underdog and DraftKings. I would say, I'm going to get Justin's take on this, but I would say at least 10% of the people drafting in these right now are just stone cold dead because they are not setting up their teams in a way that has enough pieces in the final round in the Super Bowl to win. So we'll cover today basic strategy. We'll cover some advanced strategy. We'll get some micro takes off as well. And be sure to stay tuned to the end because we will do a live draft here and we will be servicing the audio listeners, of course, and we'll do a live draft at the very end of the show. Before we get started here, reminder to everyone, if you don't have access to our fantasy playoff content and rankings, you can gain access to that by subscribing to either DraftKit Pro or the in-season package. Monthly and weekly options are available for in-season. If you do get in-season, you'll have access to all the DFS work that we do throughout the playoffs as well. All right. Enough's enough, Herzig. Let's get into it here on Playoff Best Ball. I think for anybody who hasn't played before, the most important thing that you can understand is just basic playoff-only best ball strategy 101. And what I mean by that is you have to be sure your team can actually win first place. And this is not the DFS stuff where it's like, well, you need to have the leverage and the owner. No. There are teams that literally, as soon as they're drafted, we know they cannot win first place. So Herzig, why don't you go through for the people what you would consider playoff-only best ball strategy 101?
Yeah, and so a lot of people have done different kind of fantasy formats in the playoffs. I think what's particular, important here is you need to advance each round, and each round is its own scoring. So what you score in the wild card round in the first round is not going to help you for the future rounds so long as you advance. So the key is build a team for that contest structure that allows you to advance through the first round, the wild card round, then the divisional, then the conference, and then the Super Bowl. And as we get there, all the prizes, just like when we do, full season best ball, the prizes were in week 17. We talk about correlation. Maybe you can get that small edge. In playoff best ball, it's not about correlation and small edges. It's like you need all the points to come from our version of week 17, that Super Bowl, because that's where all the prizes are. We'll talk through the different contests, but the two main contests on DraftKings and Underdog, it's $150,000 to first place. If you finish in 15th or 20th place, you're looking at like $2,000 or $3,000. So the key really is yes, you have to get a team to that Super Bowl, meaning you have to advance each round. But most importantly, when there, you want to make sure your team is optimized so you can actually put up as many points as possible because that's where all the money, all the prizes are.
And as an extreme example, let's say I drafted a team that was 5 Ravens and 5 Chiefs. I could probably get to the Super Bowl, but when I'm there, I'm dead-ish. Am I dead in that? If you have 5 from one, how many players do you think you need viable in the Super Bowl round to have a viable chance at winning?
Yeah, so if you would have given the example of Bills and Chiefs, I would have said, yes, you are dead because both those teams are playing in the first round. They don't struggle through the bye. So if one of those two teams makes it to the Super Bowl, it's highly likely that the players that you have are going to be complemented by other people on the other side who have the NFC team. And so, yeah, maybe you can finish min cash and finish in the top half or something. But again, you're maybe going to get like $1,000 when all the money is at the top. Now, it's interesting with the Ravens example because for the 1 seeds, you really can't have too many that are, hey, if you're going to go for 6 Ravens in the underdog structure, that means you only have 4 players that are actually playing in the first round and you're unlikely to advance. So if you told me, I wouldn't advise going 5 Ravens, 5 Chiefs, because there's zero chance of having more than 5 players in the Super Bowl. But if you went 5 Ravens and 5 from any NFC team, now you got to think, okay, the 5 from the NFC team, does that enough firepower in the first round to get you through that first wild card round when you have no Ravens? And then from there, okay, now those 2 can meet in the Super Bowl. And if by chance you chose 5 from the Bucks or the Eagles or someone like that, and also 5 Ravens, they meet in the Super Bowl, you may even have the nuts where like no one can beat you.
Right, exactly. And so to be clear, just to sum it up, I would consider strategy 101 in this format to have multiple players from teams in opposite conferences, right? I mean, does that just boil it down? And we'll get into all the first round stuff and the buy stuff here in a second. But for people that don't have multiple players from teams on either side of the conference, I would consider them almost dead. Would you agree there that that's just the strategy 101?
Yep. And I would take it even further to say you want to have a full roster of available players in the Super Bowl. So that, hey, for Underdog, it's 5, for DraftKings, it's 6, but making sure you have a potential to actually have all those roster spots filled out.
Okay. The advancement structure is extremely notable. So it's different, I believe, on DraftKings and FanDuel, because obviously you have to advance out of each round, and that lets you know how many players you can take. I know Underdog had some tournaments where it was 2 out of 6 advance in the first round. And in that format, yeah, if I only need to get second place to advance, maybe I can take more 1 seed Ravens who have a bye this first round and get through. Maybe I can take more 1 seed 49ers and still get through. So what can you tell the people about adapting to advancement structures?
Yeah, so the 2 core tournaments, the 2 largest tournaments, we'll talk about both Underdog and DraftKings. On Underdog, that's the Gauntlet. It's a $25. It's 10 rounds. You're playing 1 quarterback, 1 running back, 2 wide receiver tight ends, 1 flex, 5 bench. Now, the advancement structure, as Adam said, that first round is 2 out of 6. 33% of teams are going to advance. That's like the easiest one. You really shouldn't focus pretty much at all on that round, other than making sure, you have a full team. Because the next is 2 out of 14. That's a 1 out of 7 shot. The next is a 1 out of 8 shot. Those are twice as hard, twice and almost 3 times as hard as that first round. So that's where you really want to kind of optimize for, yes, the championship. But if you're then going to say, okay, and what else? It's that divisional, it's that conference. And the way that you can optimize for those is making sure that you're not drafting too much of Eagles and Buccaneers. Because if you're taking teams where best case scenario, you're going to be losing some of your guys. Why? Well, you're optimizing for the easiest round, which is a 2 out of 6, and really kind of putting yourself behind the 8 ball for every other round going forward.
Okay. And what about the advancement structure on DK?
And Underdog, make sure you check, because that was the Gauntlet. Other ones, they are 1 out of 6. So make sure and adapt to what that structure is.
Yeah.
For DraftKings, I think there's 3 tournaments that I saw. The main was their $20 main tournament. That's 1 out of 6 advance, 1 out of 6 advance, 1 out of 6 advance, and 136 team final. I believe all of their contests are going to be 1 out of 6 advance. And then the final just ranges depending on how large of a contest size it was.
Okay. Even in 2 out of 6, you can't take a team, obviously, that is all Ravens and 49ers, right? Obviously, you can't do that. But in 2 out of 6, you're more likely, and that's where you can adjust our rankings as you see fit. If it's 2 out of 6, I would move up Ravens and 49ers. Was that fair?
Yeah. And I mean, the truth is you can't really move them up that much, because you've got 49ers, 5 of their guys, the core 5 that we know of CMC, Debo, Ayuk, Purdy, Kittle, are all going in the first 12 picks, the first 2 rounds. Yeah. Baltimore, Lamar, and Zay are also. So we're talking 8 out of the first 12 picks are 49ers and Ravens. Right. So people are already building and understanding that. And maybe it's a unique year where, I don't know, at least intuitively, I feel like San Francisco and Baltimore are head and shoulders above all the other teams. And yes, we like the Cowboys, we like the Bills, we like some of these other teams, but I think the public really says these teams are far and away the best. So I want to make sure that in my early rounds, I get at least 1 or 2 of these teams, and then hope that I can not only advance, but then build strong enough, complementary players to get you through and to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, to Justin's point, market kind of agrees with public sentiment. 49ers around plus 220 to win the Super Bowl. Ravens plus 320, then a big gap back to Bills plus 650, Cowboys plus 750, and then another big gap back to Chiefs. And then after that, it's just crapshoot. Eagles, Dolphins, Lions, Browns, all kind of in that next tier. And then you get Rams, Texans, Bucks, Packers, Steelers at the very end. Okay. I think a question that a lot of people have as they're doing these drafts is like how to value dusty players from a good team or dusty players from a stack you're making versus good players from bad teams. So an example that I would have is like, I'm on the clock. I have a Dallas stack going. I could take Rico Dowdle. And I don't even know what the ADPs are. So this is maybe a bad example, but I could take Rico Dowdle or I could take Puka Nacua. Obviously, Puka Nacua is a way better play. He's also a dog in round one, and I have the Cowboys stack going. How do you weigh dusty pieces from your stack versus actual good players?
Yeah, so I mean, if you've got the Cowboys going, you are expecting the Cowboys are going to make it to the Super Bowl, if that's your primary stack. With the Rams, it's kind of interesting because Rams play Detroit first round. If the Rams win, then they're going to be playing San Francisco and Dallas. They wouldn't meet until the conference championship. So in that scenario, I'm okay if you actually say, I want to go Puka because Puka can actually provide me value in the wild card round, in the divisional, and in the conference championship. Now, if we were to say, okay, I'm going to go Dallas, and now I might look at Aaron Jones or Jaden Reed or someone, I'd much, much, much rather have just about any Dallas player, even if you think they're not even going to play, give me some Deuce Vaughn or some crazy crap over grabbing a Jaden Reed or an Aaron Jones, because all that maybe helps you is that first round with that one outlier performance, but also you need the Packers to have a good enough performance that they don't beat Dallas, but like it just doesn't make sense. So that's where I'd say you got to be careful of like, all right, how dusty do you want to get? But in a world where you can build out that, hey, a dusty player can get you to the conference championship while your primary stack stays alive, awesome. Yeah. If you're only building for that first round, that 2 out of 6, that's not worth it.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is where we start to get into advanced strategy for this format where a lot of people aren't thinking down the road. They aren't thinking, when can these teams meet? I have a Dallas stack going. When can they meet the Packers? When can they meet the Rams? And how do I want to adjust the rankings for that? And that's why, we have the rankings up for this, and it's super important, and we're going to import our rankings. Everybody should be using our rankings. But if you're not combining this with the strategy stuff, you're in big, big trouble. Justin has our written article up about some of this stuff as well that everybody should check out. All right. Difference between the sites is tight end. On DraftKings, tight end is not its own position. I'm sorry. On Underdog, tight end is not its own position. On DraftKings, we must play a tight end. How do you think that changes things site by site?
Yeah, so for Underdog, I'd say we're pretty in line with the value of tight ends. And you kind of just say, hey, like this is another player on that team. And it doesn't really tilt the scale one way or the other. On DraftKings is where we're seeing, at least right now. I mean, this is Monday the 8th. The contest just opened earlier today, and people haven't truly adjusted. They haven't incorporated ETR ranks yet. But what we're seeing is strong value at the tight end position. I mean, you look at the tight ends that are in the playoffs this year, you have a lot of the top guys: Kelsey, Kittle, Njoku, Ferguson, Schultz, Kincaid, Goddard, Isaiah Likely. Like, these are strong players, and some of these may actually be like the top performing player on their team. I mean, Kelsey, okay. Isaiah Likely makes sense. Dallas Goedert with AJ Brown and Devontae hurt. Like, there's a lot of these where not only are they just like, you need to play a tight end on DraftKings, but the offense could actually run through these tight ends. And so if you look at the ranks that we have up on the site, we are very bullish or kind of above market on the tight ends. And I think that makes sense when people aren't really accounting for, oh, I need that tight end position. And there's only maybe 10 viable tight ends right now that are available in the playoffs, where running backs, you probably have more around like 20 or so. Wide receivers, you've got more because, teams are using more multiple running backs, far more wide receivers. QBs and tight ends are the only ones. If there's only one, we know how important QBs are. I think that's where the value might be from the DraftKings standpoint, is getting that tight end on your roster. Yeah,
I think that's super interesting. And the other thing that I would say about DraftKings is a lot of the best ball stuff that we talked about, where you get the outsized ceilings on DraftKings from the wide receiver position. Typically, you get the 100-yard bonus, you get the full PPR. Just makes a huge, huge difference. And, it made a huge difference for me, and I know for you too, Justin, is just kind of understanding DraftKings scoring system maybe better than other people. Any other scoring system or site-specific stuff that you want to note?
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch on that with the wide receiver. Like we saw it in regular season basketball, we see it in DFS, but the wide receivers just have such high upside and are just, more likely to give you those kind of ceiling outcomes. And so what I've noticed with DraftKings drafts is if you go after one of those teams that doesn't have many elite wide receivers, I don't know, think of the Chiefs. It's really easy to kind of feel that pain of not having wide receivers come those later rounds because all right, Chiefs, I'm going to start off with Mahomes and Kelsey in the first, two, maybe 2-3. Then I might grab Pacheco. Now my first wide receiver is Rashee Rice. And now we're in the 5th, 6th round. And all those other really high quality wide receivers, especially the ones you're trying to pair with in the NFC, they're gone. So I think it really makes sense for think through the team that you're drafting as your primary stack. And maybe you're actually willing to say, you know what? I'm not going to go Mahomes Kelsey because not only is that really chalky, everyone's doing it, but let me go Mahomes and CeeDee Lamb because CeeDee Lamb's going second or third. Mahomes is going kind of in the late second. So you could go with that. Now you've got that elite wide receiver and you're giving up a Kelsey. And you know what? Hey, come Super Bowl, Chiefs versus Cowboys, who would you probably rather have? CeeDee Lamb. And so you're okay with saying, I'm still going to build the Kansas City Chiefs, even though I missed out on Kelsey. So just think through as you build out your draft according to what you want to build for the end. So from those early rounds, you don't have to go with just the chalk. Let me stack this one team, but okay, let me think through how I can maybe get a little unique while protecting myself from that wide receiver avalanche risk.
Okay. The other dynamic that's going on here on Underdog's contest specifically is that the contest has been open for a month. And so people have been building teams for a month when we didn't know if the Bills would be in the playoffs, when we didn't think the Steelers would be in the playoffs. I mean, there were all kinds of things. People drafted dead teams, i.e. teams that have a lot of players who ended up not making the playoffs. But some people have some outrageous teams already in this tournament, I suspect. How do you think strategy changes for Underdog if you're drafting this week, knowing that it's been open for so long?
Yeah, so I think for the gauntlet, we're already about 2/3, if not more, of the way through. And it's been open for at least a month. And so my normal strategy, it vastly changes. So for Underdog, I'm really only building 3 different ways. And these are all adapting to knowing that, hey, this tournament's been open for a month. And first off, let's talk about why that's important. The Buffalo Bills a month ago, what were their chances of making the playoffs? I think we were looking at like 15%. Something pretty low. So these guys, while they were still being drafted, they were being drafted in the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th round. You could pretty much get Josh Allen in the 6th round and then grab all of the guys. And that means your first 5 rounds, you're taking whoever you want, 5 Cowboys, 5 49ers. So for me, I'm saying I'm pretty much fading the Bills 100% on Underdog because I'm so far behind the 8 ball of what these optimal teams in the Super Bowl would look like. All right, so that's why it matters. Now, how I'm adapting to this, I'm building 3 different ways. First one is I'm going after the 1 seeds, the San Francisco and Baltimore, and trying to build a Super Bowl for if the 1 seeds both advance. Because this is the most likely scenario. It's going to happen 19% of the time, according to the current odds. And the past month, people don't have an edge in that because most teams that drafted for the scenario, they're likely dead in the wild card round because maybe they didn't know that the Ravens and 49ers, because a month ago, the Ravens didn't look like the 1 seed. The 49ers didn't look like the 1 seeders, maybe the Eagles. So teams that were drafting way back when, they probably didn't account for, I need to only have 5 of those 2 teams and then have other strong ones. And you know what? The people who did account for it, maybe they filled that in with Jags, with Vikings, with Colts. I know I've got like a whole bunch of Jags, and those are pretty much dead because I tried to push forward some San Francisco teams, but now they're going to die in the wild card round. So now with the info we have, we also know, hey, who's not going to play the 1 seed until later on? We know who the 4 and 5 seeds are. The Chiefs and the Lions are great stack partners because if they win, they don't play the 49ers or the Ravens. So that's the one is, all right, I want to build just for this SF versus Baltimore matchup. Second one I'm going for, I take one of those 1 seeds and now I build 1 or 2 teams from the other conference. I start off by grabbing the QB from the other conference because that allows me to only draft 1 QB, where if you grab Lamar, you grab Purdy, you have to get another QB just to advance that first round. So I'm like, okay, and we have the new information of what teams wouldn't play until the conference championship. So I can optimize for those for those divisional rounds, the conference championship rounds, while still kind of getting a 1 seed through. And the third is if I'm going two teams that don't have a bye, I am only drafting from those two teams. I am going full stacks because now that we know that the Eagles and the Chiefs don't have any buys, if those two teams make the Super Bowl, those two teams, I mean, what have they done? They've had to win every week. That means they probably had strong offensive performances, meaning if you've got all players from two teams that have won every week, that have put up strong performances, they're probably going to advance you to all those rounds. And now when you get to the Super Bowl, if it is those two teams, if you don't have all the pairings, like you're probably not going to win because other people are doing that.
Do you think that it's optimal when you can to only draft one quarterback? Obviously, if you draft Lamar or Purdy, you need two. But in other scenarios, do you think it's optimal to just have one quarterback in these?
Yeah, I think it depends on who the players are and all that. Like, I think my favorite teams are when I only have that one quarterback. If I'm drafting Jalen Hurts, I'm only drafting Jalen Hurts. If I'm drafting,
Dak.
see.
Only Dak, right?
Yeah, I think only Dak, especially if I had Lamb. If I maybe like missed out on Lamb and I'm going Dak Pollard, maybe then because what you do want to do is build for uniqueness. And one way to get a unique team to the Super Bowl round is if Dak has a really bad week, because a lot of teams that only drafted Dak are going to lose. And so that's where I am more willing to kind of, with the guys like a Dak, is let me also grab someone on the other side just to help out, because yes, it's rare, but in those scenarios where Dak has the really bad game, Pollard has the 2 touchdowns, they win that, a whole bunch of Cowboys teams are going to be out of the running, but you've got the unique aspect because you got lucky with your AFC QB going. The other I would say is when you pick Ravens or 49ers, you don't, and I don't want to grab one of the, and I'm not grabbing one of those 2 QBs. On the other conference, I'll then often grab 2 QBs and 2 teams and say, hey, my 1 seed is going to make it to the Super Bowl, and now I'm giving myself 2 outs. And it's not as bad as like playing it safe because this gives you now more firepower as well in those early rounds to advance. And in those, you want to make sure that in your Super Bowl, you have a quarterback. So that way I can get 2 QBs from the same plan. They don't play each other until the conference championship and then get one of those to the Super Bowl.
Okay. I think like it's such a different form of fantasy because it's not really about player takes for much of it. You still have to have some player takes, I think, but figuring out the paths and figuring out who you think is going to make the Super Bowl, it's like some combination of betting futures and playing fantasy and playing best ball. It really is cool. Okay. I do want to get to a draft. Before we do, though, is there any late picks, late teams that you have your eye on? My first thought was Packers stuff at Dallas as a 7.5 or so point dog in round 1. Jordan Love is playing at like a borderline MVP level right now. It would not shock me, and they got Jair Alexander back. It would not shock me if the Packers gave Cowboys trouble and could even win that game in Dallas. That is not what the market thinks. I mean, Green Bay is 100-1 to win the Super Bowl. So I assume that Packers stuff is going very, very late. But that was one that I thought was interesting from an offensive firepower and ability to win perspective. Any thoughts on that one and any other late teams or picks you like?
Yeah, so if you think of the 2 7 seeds, they're kind of in similar situations where they're substantial underdogs in that first round, but then they also have to go to Baltimore and go to San Francisco. So Steelers for me, I think they're literally 12.5 point like team total. I'm completely fading them. I'm accepting that. Packers, they're virtually unowned. No one's been drafting them, especially on the underdog side of things. So if you did want to go hard on them, I think it's a fine play, but I would never do a one-off there. I want to, like, if I'm going Packers, I'm playing hard for them to at least make it to the conference championship and be a complementary piece to a Ravens team, or that they'll go to the Super Bowl. The teams that I really like, for me, it's the 4 and the 5 seats. I'll start with the 6 because the 6, I think they have a similar challenge where I'm expecting the 7s lose. So the 6, if they win, they're most likely, again, also going to Baltimore and San Francisco. And the market is already overrating because the Rams have the sexiness, the high-powered offense, then the Miami sexiness, high-powered offense. So I think market is above what we actually should be valuing those 2 teams because of their difficult path. But the 4 or 5 seeds I like a lot because both those are kind of coin flip games. Both of them have some concentrated offenses where like the points actually go through. And we talked about there's a decent chance of the 6 seeds pull that first upset which if that happens, now the 4-5 gets an easier second round matchup, a winnable one there. Having to go to Dallas or having to go to Buffalo is a lot better than to Baltimore or San Francisco. And so that's where I'd say like and they're extremely cheap. Like you can get full team stacks in the later rounds of just about all of the Texans, Browns, Eagles, and Bucks.
Yeah, to be clear, as Justin said, he's talking about Eagles, Bucks, or the 4-5, or the 5-4, I should say, in the NFC, and Texans, Browns, the 4-5 game in the AFC. Yeah, that certainly sounds good to me. All right, let's do a draft. We had I feel like regular best ball is more for me because I can fire off my player takes, and that is your biggest edge. I still think your biggest edge in season long best ball is player takes. This is not that. So I am going to try to mostly contain myself on player takes as we do this draft, even though that will be difficult. But yes, producer Luke, let's enter the draft. All right, let's get into a draft now. We're going to fire one up on DraftKings here. DraftKings is 6 teams in each draft, 12 rounds. You must start 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 flex. We drew the 4th pick here. Justin, any thoughts on picking from the 4 hole here?
Yeah, so we have not updated the rankings on the site yet, so we're using ADP, and I think people can kind of decide if you want to use the ranks. I think it helps from a player take standpoint. It also, I think it's good to start off with a couple drafts and get a feel for where ADP is. So for this, we assume there's going to be a lot of kind of new people to this, so we're keeping ADP as it is so you can see where kind of what's showing up at the top of the queue. From the 4 spot, I believe like, hey, CMC, CeeDee Lamb, Lamar, Josh Allen, Debo. Honestly, the way that I have it right now, Debo just passed Tyreek, I guess, in the past hour, is a fine start, and you can build out. I'd say similar to in the first round, we talk about best ball, that we don't want to kind of go in with, I want to draft this player, but let the draft come to you. Even more so with playoff best ball, you let the draft fall to you. And that's exactly what's going to happen at the 4th pick. And then we'll start building our team from there.
Yeah. On our rankings, we have CMC first, Lamb second, Josh Allen third, Lamar Jackson 4th, and Debo 5th. It seems like there's a big drop off there where you don't really want to get the 6th pick. You're ideally getting 1 through 5. Is that fair?
Yeah. But I mean, again, the 6th pick, a lot of times people make a mistake and then you get who you want there. All right. We are back to us. We went Josh Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Christian McCaffrey started off. So with that, I think it makes sense for us to go with Lamar and build from there.
All right. Lamar Jackson. So Josh Allen was the first overall pick, then CeeDee, then McCaffrey, then Lamar. Very different from how I would play normal best ball, of course, on DraftKings, where I would never take quarterback this early, but this is playoff best ball. So Debo goes right after us, 5th. BTFD. Inappropriate name there, but BTFD is on the clock here at the turn with the 6-7.
So interesting. Can't search for teams on here yet. Okay. We've got a San Francisco stack behind us, Tyreek Hill and Ayuk paired. So if we want, we can say, hey, we can go for the Detroit, or we can kind of take the Zay easy on. I'd probably say, you know what, I'm going to go Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And expect that Zay Flowers will fall back to us with the next one. Just a little tip as you're going. This is when you probably want to start queuing up players and just showing like, hey, to get the visibility for who you're probably targeting going forward.
Yeah, and we're doing as good as job as we can talking about what's going on here, but you guys can go to YouTube. We'll be up a little bit later. You'll be able to see the draft board. So again, after we took Lamar at 4, it went Debo, Tyreek, Ayuk. So the gun guy at the turn started Tyreek, Ayuk. The 5th pick has Debo and Purdy. We started Lamar, Amon-Ra, then Kelsey, then Dak. So Lamb and Dak paired there, and Diggs got back to the guy who had Allen also. And what you see in these, Justin, is like, ooh, somebody took Zay Flowers. Yeah. And then Mahomes goes. So we do not have a Raven stack available to us. We do have Jahmyr Gibbs as part of a Detroit stack. But yeah, at this point, we can't be reaching for Ravens, right? Like we're not taking Gus Edwards in the 2nd round.
No, definitely not. And Jahmyr Gibbs is the one where if we don't take him now, then we're not going to get him. So we'll stick with that Lions stack a little further, grab ourselves a strong running back with the Jahmyr Gibbs.
Right. And so like people sniping other people is maybe playing bad. Like, I don't think this guy's playing bad. He took Lamb, Prescott, Flowers. That's obviously a really, really strong start. But my point is that if people are playing bad, they can snipe your stacks. And I understand people complain about that. I hate when people complain about what other people are doing in drafts. Do you think that it's warranted? Because I get what people are saying. Like, why would you take X guy you don't have? This doesn't make any sense for your team, etc.
Yeah, I mean, fine, complain. It's not going to do anything. At the end of the day, the person who is making the bad picks is building a team that's not going to get them a chance to win it all. So, like, be happy in the grand scheme of things that person's in the draft paying the rake. But, like, yeah, it sucks that, like, they screwed up your team. It is what it is.
Yeah, okay. So we are back on the clock now. Rashee Rice, when we can take Goff. We can take Isaiah Likely here. We already have quarterback, though. Any thoughts, Justin?
Yeah, we are in a tough bind. I'm going to grab Goff right now. So I'm just real like this clock's going really fast. It's a 15-second draft clock on DraftKings as well, which we're used to a 30. So you'll realize in the drafts, like it's going quickly, but maybe we reached a little on Goff there, but there wasn't any other Lion or Raven that I expected to kind of go in between. And since we went Lamar, we knew we were going to need another QB. I'd rather grab a QB that gives me that stack option.
It's really unlikely now, or somewhat unlikely, that people reach for Isaiah Likely or Gus Edwards or any guys like that. Do you think you can let them go further past ADP because of that, or you just got to take them?
You can, but there's got to be a reason why you're doing that. Because, like, it's not worth it for me to just go grab Cooper Kupp because Cooper Kupp's awesome because it doesn't fit into, unless I'm trying to also go build a Rams stack to go with it as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we are two picks away here. David Njoku is off the board again. Our team, we started from the 4-hole: Lamar Jackson, Amon-Ra, Gibbs, Jared Goff.
And so, yeah, now that we are back, and here's the other thing is we have Edwards and Likely and Montgomery all coming up pretty quickly. So yes, we're probably like reaching on one, but if we don't reach on one, we're not going to get all three. So that's what we're really trying for. And again, tight ends matter. So we grabbed Isaiah Likely.
Okay. If we're going with a bunch of Ravens, which obviously we will, getting out of round one is going to be a concern. I guess you never think that I'll take Cooper Kupp to try to get out of round one.
Not at this point. I'm still building for the Super Bowl aspects. And then later on, what is Cooper Kupp's projection versus Mike Evans? At the end of the day, it's probably very comparable. One's going a lot later. Mm-hmm. Or if you want to get, even further down, like we are back on the board now. We did miss out on Gus Edwards. That's okay though, because we're going to grab David Montgomery, and we have two really strong running backs for that Super Bowl matchup and to help us hopefully propel us through the early week.
Yeah. So now we have 4 Lions: Goff, Gibbs, St. Brown, Montgomery, hopefully to get us through round 1. And then we have Lamar and Likely coming for round 2 here.
Okay. So now, do we want to go for a third team, or do we just want to kind of stick with these two?
See, for my micro take is like, I think Jameson Williams' role is rising. It sounds like he's going to play this week. I like him as part of Lions stuff. The secondary Baltimore pieces are just a mess. Like, God, Bateman stinks. And I mean, yeah. So I would be open to like Odell stuff, I guess. But yeah, my instinct here as the fish would be to go for a different team. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think with the Lions, there's enough here that we should probably go for. I'm scrolling through right now and like Odell is actually the next here. So I'm going to queue him up. Yeah, if Laporta was obviously available, that'd be a great ad for this. But I think we just grab Odell because we do need more wide receiver firepower. That's only our second wide receiver. So let me get the wide receiver that like can still, perform well for a Super Bowl context. And now maybe we can consider, is there a second team? And we could go NFC or AFC. We probably want to still go NFC. That can help us from that early round or two.
Okay, cool.
All right, I'm looking at Tampa here. We have Mike Evans, Rashad White, and Chris Godwin are all on the board. Mike Evans would not be a horrible pick for us. When we think about Detroit and Tampa, they're not going to play each other unless Cowboys lost, which is unlikely. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, God, the way the Eagles have been playing, I mean, how can you not like the Bucs stuff to advance? I mean, the Eagles, and they got more hurt this past week. I mean, the Eagles are just a mess right now.
Yeah, that's rough. I mean, finger injury for Jalen Hurts, the knee with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith still kind of struggling from that mid ankle sprain, whatever you want to call it. All right, Bucs fell to us. So I think this is a great opportunity where we need a little more firepower. Getting someone like Mike Evans with the opportunity to also grab over Rashad Wright or a Chris Godwin later on. Could even go Cade Otton if you wanted as like a last round tight end.
Oh, man. I mean, Buck stuff is going to project off the wall this week because it's going to be good weather, and the Eagles' defense has been so bad. Like, Bucks stuff is going to project really well. I'm actually shocked that Mike Evans lasted like 20 picks past ADP, but yeah.
It's one of those things where there's no one dragging him up because the QB goes late, so everyone else is focusing on their stacks. So a lot of time it's like, hey, who's going to make that reach first that complements their teams? And we did it for Mike Evans. The same person who grabbed the Zay Flowers and has quite a wonky team over here grabbed Rashad White as well. I think this is where we grab Chris Godwin because once we make one bet on Tampa, we're not expecting them to flame out in round one. We're expecting that, okay, Chris Godwin maybe also has that decent game. We should have Godwin in the queue, but we should be looking at some more of the kind of Ravens, Lions, but let's review what our first round looks like because you want to make sure we're safe there. So we'll have Goff, we'll have Gibbs and Montgomery, we'll have Amon-Ra, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin. So really the only things we're missing, out on for first round is Lamar, Likely, and Beckham. That's not too bad.
We don't have a tight end for round one yet.
Correct. Yep, that's good. So that's where Cade Otton could be our play. I don't know. I'm looking for people, for the servicing listeners, the best available tight ends are Dalton Schultz. That's really it of the ones who would perform in week one.
Yeah. Yeah. Laporta and Andrews are obviously there, but hurt. Tucker Kraft is going to be feeling pressure from Luke Musgrave also.
Yeah. So let's talk through this Dalton Schultz, because if we grabbed a Houston guy, if Houston wins, they would then play Baltimore unless Miami beat Kansas City or Pittsburgh played up. Okay, Dalton Schultz just left. So that was a possibility, but I do think Cade Otton might be projected for 3 fewer points than Dalton Schultz, but he's tied to our offense that has that higher upside.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's look at some. All right, I'm going to put Jameson Williams in the queue. I think that's a good one. Talk to me about Josh Reynolds. Is his role going to expand with Laporta getting hurt?
I don't think so, but I think there are more red zone targets available. So, I don't think there'll be more base targets available, but yeah, I could see it.
Yeah, I do think this is where the player takes come into play. Comparing players between two different teams, you shouldn't really be thinking of kind of individual one-game performance. There's far more macro aspects. But when you are deciding on a specific team, Odell Beckham versus Rashad Bateman versus Nelson Aguilar. Who do you go for there? If you have strong takes there, that is where your player takes can really help you out.
Oh, yeah. I like that we got Odell. But, yeah, we lost out on Jameson Williams there. Somebody took him.
No, we did.
Oh, we did. Perfect.
Yeah. We got him.
Oh, now we're cooking. Waymo for JMO.
All right, we have 2 more picks. We know one has to be Cade Otton. So I'm just going to avoid the crazy snipe there, even though highly, highly unlikely, but it's just not worth us missing out on that.
Right.
And we are back on the clock. So we will grab Cade Otton. And that leaves us one more slot at the end, which could be Josh Reynolds. It could be Rashad Bateman. Now, when I think through a Josh Reynolds versus Rashad Bateman, from a projection standpoint, Rashad Bateman definitely looks better because he's attached to Baltimore. Baltimore has the better shot of making it to the Super Bowl. But if we're already saying no, this is going to be a Baltimore or Detroit Super Bowl, we now no longer need to worry about the games played aspect, and we're just looking for who's going to have the better chance of producing in that Super Bowl. I think Josh Reynolds is probably the one there, unless you're thinking, oh no, it's going to be Tampa, but that changes all.
Yeah, that's super interesting one. I Bateman on talent, I think is way better. He just does not do it. But in a huge Lamar game, I probably prefer Bateman versus a huge golf game doesn't have to include Reynolds, but yeah.
So what are you thinking? Reynolds or Bateman for our final pick?
I probably think Bateman, unless you think we need Reynolds to get out of the first round.
No, we've got 5 wide receivers. I'm just going to look to see. So, I'm going to sneeze. Okay, sneeze done. We're going to take Bateman. I was looking to see, we only have 2 running backs with the Lions. So maybe like we could have said, hey, was it worth it grabbing someone like Aaron Jones? But we know the Lions need to win this game. And in a game they win, it's likely that either Montgomery or Gibbs has a big game.
They're so run heavy in the red zone. And the other thing that people forget is that running back doesn't matter, especially on DraftKings. So I'm fine with us only having the 2 Lions guys. Last Lions player take I'd have is I think Brock Wright probably ahead of James Mitchell, but those would have been sleep. If you wanted to go with one of those guys over Otten, maybe we could have done that, a Brock Wright or James Mitchell. I'm not sure. I prefer Brock Wright slightly, but both those guys are going to be involved, assuming Laporta is out.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense.
All right. To recap, we have a Detroit stack. We have a Ravens stack. And we have filled it in with Evans and Godwin in a 2-2-6-2 formation. Justin, how do you feel about our team here?
I think it's okay. We really, like in that 4th round, when you're doing the Baltimore-Detroit, like not getting Zay Flowers, I think really hurt us. Because if Zay Flowers could have fallen us to the 3rd round, which I think is once you grab Lamar, like it's usually pretty common you can stack the Flowers. Gibbs then probably would have fallen to the 4th with us. And then it kind of makes more sense. So it really is like, hey, we missed out on that Flowers, which then made us reach on all these others. Now, we could very easily have a game that Lamar doesn't need Flowers, and so we're still alive in the Super Bowl. I do like that Mike Evans, kind of Chris Godwin late value we got. So I'll give this like a B+.
I like the Mike Evans. We go back to the top for a sec. The guy who took Flowers, what would you have done there? Because he started Lamb Prescott, so he can't really take Gibbs there, I don't think. And there's a lot of NFC guys. He doesn't want to take another quarterback in Mahomes. There's a lot of NFC guys that go around him. Maybe he could have taken like a Rashee Rice or something like that over Zay. I don't know. But yeah, what would you have done if you started Lamb and Dak and then you were on the clock there at 3.2?
Yeah, so I don't think the Flowers is a horrible one, but he didn't continue with that at all. He doesn't have Gus Edwards. He didn't have Gus Justice Hill. It's just like a one-off Zay Flowers. I think that's where it's bad. Now, he could have gone with Isaiah Pacheco. He could have gone with James Cook. Whatever you want to go with, like any of those higher end AFC teams had some good players available, and any of them are fine. And like, I'm not faulting him for taking Zay Flowers, but whichever one you go with, you got to hammer that home. You got to stick with it. And so just going with a one-off Zay Flowers in the 3rd and no other Ravens to support it, that's where it's a problem.
Yeah. All right. It's so interesting, man. I hope you guys are all having fun doing these best ball drives. I do think there's a big edge. If you can think about this in a way that we talked about here today, I do think there is a really, really big edge for sure. If you go to the site, you will find our rankings for Underdog. You'll find our rankings for DraftKings. You'll find Herzig's article on strategy for these. And then also coming Tuesday, we'll have our rankings up for FFBC Playoff Challenge and NFFC Playoff Challenge as well. Really tight turnaround to get these teams drafted and going. But yeah, we're trying to get this stuff up as early as possible for you guys so you can get into it before Saturday. All right. Much thanks to Justin for being here and sharing his strategy. Justin, tell the people where they can find you if you want to be found.
Justin Herzig on Twitter, and all the content's on ETR.
All right. At Justin Herzig on the Twitter machine. Appreciate you all being here. For Justin, for producer Luke, for Jerry, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.